Okay, welcome back. This is our last low code, no code session for Devtoberfest 2022. I'm Dan Robleski. I'm the developer advocate for low code, no code. It's a little bit sad that the month is ending. I just wanted to do two housekeeping notes. One is that we still have the Devtoberfest contest. Here I've gotten to level 3. Okay, I'm not going to win the grand prize. Very sad, but there's still several days to do more tutorials, to answer questions. I will put some questions in the chat that you can try to answer based on the sessions that we had today. And the other last thing is there's feedback that we want from what you thought of Devtoberfest, anything you have to say about Devtoberfest. You can go to the Devtoberfest group in the SAP community, reply to the post, and tell us just anything that you want. Okay, so now I'm going to give it to Rupam, who will talk about extensions for Work Zone.
Thanks, Daniel. I will get started by sharing my screen. And yeah, hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right, I will get rid of this one. Okay, so welcome. Once again, this is the last session from SAP Work Zone as well. And here we will cover in a growing complexity, if you may say, continuing from the previous session about how you can get the best out of declarative UI integration cards, declarative type of cards. Here we'll talk about the other extensibility options that you have in SAP Work Zone, and more complex scenarios deserve more complex solutions. So we have some secrets that I want to share with you as to how pro coders can become SAP Work Zone ninjas. And to start with, again, I will try and do a very quick recap of what are we going to talk about to keep the context, but I would highly encourage the other sessions that we've already done today, if you could just watch them and get more familiar with the terms and the concepts if you do not already have. We will go into component cards. We'll talk about what are component cards, how are they different from declarative cards, and what are their, why do we need them. We will talk about shell plugins and what are they used for, and also how third-party applications can integrate with SAP Work Zone using the APIs and webhooks method. So without much ado, let's get started with a quick recap of SAP Work Zone. SAP Work Zone is your digital workplace solution from SAP as a service on business technology platform, and it centralizes the access for the users for relevant business applications, processes, informations, and communications. And it empowers the business users, blending in the business data and unstructured content, and engages the user in interactive workspaces, forums, feeds, and etc. So that comes together the business content in forms of cards and applications, and then the interactive, collaborative features like forums and knowledge base articles and things like that on the other side, and building in a structure which is done in terms of workspaces and pages within SAP Work Zone. So you can always extend SAP Work Zone, and the developers can give has a lot of freedom to build various things, starting from applications, UI5 based declarative cards, or for that matter, component cards, which we'll see today. And in case you want to make major changes to the behavior of the Work Zone in itself, you would probably use something like a shell plugin. Now, UI integration cards are like this, where you can have a small building block of content that comes from business backend, various business backend to be precise, and can then show a mashup of information along with the other SAP Work Zone capabilities around it. So they sit very well inside the page. You've probably seen how easy it is to manage the layout of the page without having to code about that. And declarative UI integration cards is what we talked about the last, which really needs very little to almost no coding experience. And how do we do advanced card development? We just saw in the previous session, but I'll do a quick recap. We saw how we can add business data into your card using the destinations and then managing the path and etc. to bind the UI elements to the data that is coming as a from the backend and then showing it into the card. Other is card configuration. How do you add parameters to the card and how that can be set by the administrator, which affects the card's behavior at runtime. We also saw how you can make cards context aware, which means it can set and receive information from the page that they belong to, and hence every other card that belongs to the same page could interact with each other by virtue of this page context or page context parameters. And finally, what we talked about is the manifest extension, allowing you to do basic data transformations within declarative cards, making it less bound to only use the backend service, or if that doesn't fit into the card structure that it expects, it's still possible for us to, as a developer, change the card or transform the data in a way that the card can still show up. For example, if you have a service that shows returns the static data as is, but you want to show a donut chart, you would probably do a crunching at the client side using this manifest extension and attach that to the donut charts input. That is also possible without having to change the backend service, which may or may not be in your control. And hence the use of manifest extensions. But now, having said that declarative cards can do so much, including using manifest extension to transform data, why do we need something else? Well, component cards are needed in scenarios where they do not fit into the basic templates provided for declarative cards already. Now, if you really compare the two, they are the same architecture, that they have this header, the content area, the footer, and then they have this manifest, and it's similar in which you develop it, in which you deploy it, and bundle it, etc. Everything is similar, except that component cards also come with additional view, controller, and model concepts along with it. So if you're familiar with UI5 development, UI5 applications, you would know that this component cards sort of brings in the flavor of freestyle UI development with using UI5. If you really do want to do a comparison, you can say that declarative cards are more like your Fiori elements and component cards are more like your freestyle UI5, because sometimes you need certain aspects which are not covered by, say, the standard declarative cards like list card, etc. I'm giving you some examples in this UI. You can see that you could probably build something very customized for your specific needs from the card. For example, you could probably build something like a heat map, or which is currently not yet supported in declarative card, or you can even add third-party integrations like Twitter feed, etc. Or for that matter, a map, which we will probably do just now, or build something called a guided experience. So instead of talking about it before I move to any other thing, I will try and show you the list of cards and types of cards that you could create. Here are the declarative cards, the type of cards that you usually would create. And there are chart cards and highlight cards, etc., contact cards, which are commonly used and are quite good at solving majority of use cases. But then when it is not feasible with declarative cards to start with, and you need something different from your UI, that's when you use component cards to build your own UI structure. And see here, for example, these kind of custom UI elements you might want to use, or something like a feedback with inline feedback option, or for that matter, a heat chart, which is showing you can probably interact with it. And this is little more than what you get in normal analytical cards already. Or for that matter, the Twitter feed card that we showed the other place, or a more advanced form, which when used inside your mobile application could use, say, take a picture and even invoke the device capabilities. Now, having said that, how do you build a component card? And that's what we will tackle now. We'll go ahead and create a project from template. Yes, component cards can also start from a template. And the same way as you would develop a declarative card, you would choose a UI integration card. Let's say call the project name as maps for work zone, something like, I don't know, scom.sap.dx.demo, my favorite namespace. And here's where the component card comes to play. You can choose from any of the existing declarative cards, or you can select one of the component cards to start from. There are plenty of component cards with different flavors available, but I would just take the most simple one and show you how you modify that and use it basically. So let's just take the content media card. The title would be show maps inside SAP Work Zone. This is Visual Business Analytical card. Now, the previous demo, I wasn't that lucky to get away with a live demo, live coding. Keep your fingers crossed that we do it well this time. So maps for the world. Again, the structure is quite similar to the declarative cards. You have the manifest here. Obviously, you can also do the manifest editing. Sorry, you can't do the manifest editing in the property data because it's a component card, but you can still do the preview. So let's just try and do the preview. No, I would like to preview this card that we just created. For now, what it generated is basically a card with a media because that's the template we chose. Now, same thing, you can also go ahead and change the card behaviors here. For example, the title, which is the header value, which is written in visit our shop. I'll say BB map for work zone. And that, if you see, has changed. The same thing, your manifest manages the behavior of your card like we saw for declarative cards, but that's not the end of it. That's where the differentiation really starts. For now, I'll just close this manifest and start showing you what else does it generate. So it also creates a component, because at the end of the day, every card is a UI5 component, including declarative cards, but the component is rather generative and not coded. And it also includes a view. So here you can define a custom view. And what's then the view? And if you have some SAP UI5 experience, you would know that what they're trying to do is a very basic view that adds an image to it. Now, of course, there are image cards already in Work Zone, but for sample to starting point, this is quite good. But we wanted to add the map behavior to it, right? So what can we do? By the way, it also adds a card controller, which basically, if you want some JavaScript code behind, you can add it to the card controller here, which is generated. You can see that this is setting the model and image and getting the image from the image folder and stuff like that. But what we will do is replace this card and add a map into it. And remember, maps are not feasible with declarative cards yet. There is no such corresponding template. So we can use a component card to build this thing. So first thing I will do is remove the image, and I will get a hold of a map container from Visual Business, which you can also get it from, oops. Sorry, I will just take hold of the code here that I already have for brevity of time and to save some time. I'll just format. I'll tell you what I'm doing here. So we are creating a map container. You can go to SAP UI5 documentation where there is a corresponding Visual Business map container that allows you to embed maps within and show business data on top of it. We will not go that far. We'll just see the map in action. So here's the analytical map and the container, but then this wouldn't work right away because we haven't really specified the namespaces VK and VBM. So that's the next thing I would do. I will go take hold of that as well. And again, to save some time, I'm not a big fan of this formatting in one line, so I'll just break it down and add some formatting in the next line. What I'm doing is I'm adding the corresponding namespaces where it should fetch them, and adding a height already to the card, because cards usually takes the content area, and the maps do not set a content area, rather stretches to the area. So someone has to give the height, so I'm just doing that. Right. Now, if you go to the manifest and do a slightest change, it will trigger the update of the UI and should load the card again. And there you see the card is showing with the map inside it. Obviously, Visual Business Maps are very interactive. You can use the various features of zooming in, and there are plenty of use cases for doing them. But at this point of time, we'll stop here, and we'll consider that our map card is finished, component card is finished, and we will go ahead and deploy it. Again, deploy as we did for declarative cards. Component cards are similar. Once we deploy it, we know the drill. We have to get, I don't know, how do I get rid of this? Yeah, once we go here, we need to go to the administrative console and enable this card, right? So we go to UI area, we go to cards, and we search for maps or something. Yeah, show business. This is the one we created, show maps inside SAP Work Zone. This is the one I created before, but let's just enable this. And I would now add this to my workspace, which was our team knowledge center. And let's try and add this here. So having done that, I would rather get rid of this one and add a widget here. And I think the word work zone comes up here. So this card would be rather easier. Thank God this it's not the same as the previous demo. At least the card does work. And there you go, a component card that does something specialized like a UI content that usually not feasible using declarative cards. You can do that. And obviously it's an interactive card like you would have with any visual business component that you can interact with. Obviously, you can show more data on top of this and do what you like. All right. Having said that, let's continue. So that's component card, showing a step above your declarative cards, what you can achieve with them. And to be honest, it's kind of limitless to what all you can do. Anything you can do with SAP UI5 components, you can do with it. And yeah, a lot is possible with component cards over and above the standard declarative cards, which are often seen as sufficient for most business cases, but you never know, right? All right, so we talked about component cards. Next is shell plugins. Now, shell plugins are ways in which you enhance SAP Work Zone shell behavior, the entire SAP Work Zone as a whole. Now, they allow developers to hook into the SAP Work Zone shell, the entire page for that matter, and run custom code to modify the default behavior or add some new functionality. Like what, you may ask? Like, let's say a header, a button, or like a new footer altogether, or for that matter, do some theme related changes, which are kind of way too fancy for your theme manager or theme designer. Now, what are shell plugins? How do you build them? To be honest, if you are an SAP UI5 developer, or if you have any understanding of how SAP UI5 applications are structured, as shell plugins are basically freestyle UI5 application. The only difference is what you see in the graphic here. There are a few key changes you need to do to the manifest of your UI5 application to make it look or act like a shell plugin, or rather Work Zone to consider that as a shell plugin. So you have to change those things in the generated UI5 application, and you're good to go. And where do you write the code? Obviously in the component, because the component is what gets loaded. And you also have the option to have other controllers, etc., where you can add more logic to it. And that's the whole idea of shell plugin. So how does it work? Once you enable a shell plugin in your content manager, because it's an application, it will go sit inside your managed app router. You have to add that to a particular role collection, which means people with that role collection or people with that particular authorization will have the benefit of the shell plugin. So one good example of why would you use a shell plugin is, let's say you want to give very critical pop-up information to certain specific types of users, like consultants or someone who must do certain things, or I don't know, maybe a new COVID protocol, everyone who's coming to office, and a specific type of people who are usually traveling. You want to give them some pop-up information. You could use shell plugin because that loads every time your Work Zone application loads for the first time. The shell plugin gets executed right away. if you have the correct role, that is where you assign. If you do not, obviously the shell plugin would not affect your work zone. But that's how shell plugins load up at the beginning of the load of your work zone application. And then the custom code inside your shell plugin would run. You can add a pop-up to it, or you can add whatever is your focus of the shell plugin. For example, you can make custom UI changes, add a header action footer, theme changes, and so on and so forth. And the next topic, before I jump into a demo, is to show a roundup of what all you could do with SAP Work Zone. If you're a third-party application and you would want to integrate these, the way you can integrate a third-party application to Work Zone is using APIs. And last, APIs are ways of integration. It's known, and SAP Work Zone is no different. It does give a lot of APIs to read and create content within. I'll give you a quick idea of what I mean by that. You can use the APIs to get user information. You can use the APIs to read or query the knowledge articles that are created, or query a specific knowledge article by its ID, or even create or post a knowledge article, or post an answer to a forum question and things like that. Now, again, there's a huge possible potential of such an application. Take, for example, this API usage sample here. Now, you could actually have a service inside your BTP that reads data from a legacy discussion board that your team had or your company had, some sort of an internet application, and you want to now switch over to Work Zone. How will you take this data into Work Zone? You would use some sort of a replication service which reads this legacy DB store and then uses the APIs to create and replicate those content inside your Work Zone. And that way you can automate the entire shift of the existing intranet application where you have lots of content and then move it into Work Zone, where you can continue to utilize the benefits of the latest and greatest collaboration features within Work Zone. Now, what are webhooks? Now, webhooks are the other way around, where webhooks are used to let a third-party application know that there has been some changes inside Work Zone. Very similar to APIs, except that APIs are pull-based mechanism, where the API says, when a third-party application says, I need information, I want to do something now. Webhooks are like third-party application waiting to be told when something happens. There's an example now here, which you can see in this part of the slide. Take, for example, a third-party gamification engine. Now, you want to add this logic of adding, you want to add this concept of adding points for whoever starts using SAP Work Zone and starts creating things, so that you promote the culture of sharing, collaboration within the team. So what you could do is use a third-party gamification engine, use the callback URL inside Work Zone and register itself, so that anytime any user creates a knowledge article, any activity that should be rewarded a point, the Work Zone will call back this webhook and informing the third-party gamification engine. And the third-party gamification engine could then add points to this Work Zone user. That's pretty powerful. Now, there could be other scenarios. I can think of a very interesting scenario I just came to know today was use of webhooks to do AI-driven content moderation, wherever something is done, created inside inside your workspace. Let's say I create a blog, or I write back to a forum comment. I could then call a third-party AI tool that would go ahead and run some information, run some code to check whether this article is okay. I mean, if there's a profanity or something not suitable for company-wide sharing, and then decide to not keep it or keep it. And this is like automated moderation of content. One could use webhooks for such a scenario, along with APIs. Right, so I will take you a demo, but then here's a demo scenario. We will have SAP Work Zone, and I have created a game engine API, which is I can show you here in my Postman collection. This is my game engine API. And basically, it implements a WebSocket for game engine. I could just simply connect to it. And if I say get my points, I'm sorry, and send, it will return my points, which is 360 right now. And this is how the application should be built, that this is the third-party game engine. I should be able to connect back to it. Where did I lose my presentation? Here. So these are the content that I've created within, that basically has an initial game setup. It reads the content from Work Zone, creates the initial points, and then adds it to the repo inside it. And then it has a WebSocket server, which keeps on informing everybody who's playing the game. The UI, if they're active, they keep getting notification of increase in points and stuff like that. And there's a callback service, which will be used by SAP Work Zone to inform that they are there's an update. So first thing the game engine does is reads the user information and content via APIs from SAP Work Zone, the existing content that is there. Next is we do a registration of game engine URL in the webhook so that SAP Work Zone can tell the game engine when to give points. Third thing is we create a shell plugin. That's what we will do now, because the rest of it is already configured, where we add a custom footer to the Work Zone UI. Something like this. Let's say this is my Work Zone UI, doesn't have a footer, right? I want to add a footer to this. I want to add a footer to this somewhere here, which tells me the current points, right? And then I would connect to this particular shell plugin to the WebSocket server and wait for any change in my points, and I'll show that point in my footer. That's the logic here. Now, let's say this is set up at runtime. What would happen? A user will come and create a new blog or some content that he deserves some points for. And this would notify the game engine. How? Using the webhooks. And that in turn would give points to the user, which will in turn let the WebSocket send messages to all the connected clients, basically the right collecting client for the user, and he would get the updated score. Now, I've said the entire scenario only to explain what is the purpose of this particular demo that I'm going to create now. What we're going to create now is a shell plugin that connects to the WebSocket server and waits for any score updates. And then let's see what happens when we create something for which I deserve some points. Let's just go jump right at it. I hope I'm doing right on time, or not too late, or not too bad, I guess. I'll keep it short within time, I hope. Right, I will just close these, and we're done with the component card. And now we'll start creating. The shell plugin. As I said, the shell plugin is same as a UiFab application. And so we can go here and start from a template again. And this time we will use a SAP Fiori application. Why? Because it's a Fiori application except there are some specific manifest changes that you need to do. Now, I don't want to have Fiori elements because I need to have the component.json already created, and I will just create something very basic because the view that is generated is not going to be much of use. The data source, I don't need a data source for now because I'm going to talk to a WebSocket. I don't need a model-driven data source. I will have to use some method. View, I don't know, I will just name it, but honestly, I wouldn't use the view as well because the footer I will just create in JavaScript. Okay, what should be the model name? I would say game score footer. App title, game score footer. Namespace, and you all know my favorite namespace by now. And a description, footer to show real-time game score. Right, the path, I don't want it to be in collab things. I just go in and put it in projects. I don't know why it takes that way. Right, and yeah, I need a deployment configuration because I want to deploy it to my BTP, and deployment configuration makes it a lot easier to deploy an MTAR and wrap it in an MTAR. Do we need a FLP configuration? Yes, we need, because we need to change that. We don't want the tile to show up in the application section of SAP Work Zone, and that's why we need to generate it and then change it. Do we need advanced options? I don't think so. Let's move on and choose the target system. Well, I would like to deploy it in the Cloud Foundry in BTP, and I don't need a destination name. Again, I'm not going to connect to any data source. And add the application to manage app router. Yes, please. So the semantic object we need, and here comes the things that you do specially for the shell plugins. So these are the changes. So usually a payroll application would have its own semantic object and action, but in case of a shell plugin, it has to be specifically written as shell, and the action must be plugin. This is important. You need to stick to this, and I can have game score plugin as a title. Subtitle is optional. I don't need to do that again. Now let's just finish this. Now it will generate a UI5 application. As of now, we haven't really made those manifest changes to make it look and feel like a shell plugin. But good thing is you can still use this kind of template generation. Oh, I didn't even press it. Is to already generate like 80% of it, the whole scaffolding, and then you can change the behavior and manifest a little bit. All right. I'm not sure what it's doing. It's just installing dependencies, and hopefully soon it will be done. Okay. This happens to me every time. Thank God. All right, I will open the folder that is created. And that's what is generated. So game score footer has been created. Let's not need we don't need this. The first thing I will do is change the context. Now, we don't have to change much of these because all the MTN, all the scaffolding that is generated is rather good for us already, hopefully. And let's go ahead and change the manifest. Now, what are the important changes to the manifest? First thing first. The first thing is the type of this is not an application, it's a component. So we have to change that into a component. Yeah. Next thing is to go to the cross-app navigation. We already have created shell, the action, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is exactly what we said, that this is what is needed. It was possible in the generator itself to provide, but you also have to tell that we do not want the hide launcher, and I say false. Oh, sorry, true. I want it to hide. So it should not show up in the launcher. That's basic change. And next is to be able to add, I'll just copy my code from another section, because we need to tell that SAP FLP that this is the type. It's a type plugin. These all changes should tell the subsequent deployment to app router and then to work zone when we enable it, that this is type shell plugin, and it means that you do not have to show it inside your Fury Launchpad, but rather treat it as a shell plugin and load it at the beginning of the work zone load. And that's what we just prepared ourselves for. Now, I'm a big fan of testing it early and failing early, because what's this happen? Yeah, I don't mind. Okay, so what we will do at the beginning is, instead of going the full width, I would rather try and show a small pop-up after the shell plugin loads. And let's do the whole thing, then we come back and add the game engine part of it. So let's just add a toast message and show that I'm a message from the shell plugin. Being cautious here, I guess. So not bad. It says some error in manifest. What is it? Game score footer. That's not a problem. It doesn't matter. Let's see. Let's just move on with it. Let's see if it works. Now, first thing we do is, first of all, create a MTA, build the MTA project, right? Make the MTAR, generate the MTAR. So it will generate it somewhere in the archive, MTAR archive. It's done. Oh, this was fast. And now you need to deploy the MTAR archive. It would use the same credentials like I have here, and I would use my credentials.
There's a comma in your email, by the way, instead of that.
Ah, sorry, thanks. You see, I'm set for disaster. Right, I'll just choose the right one and I'll choose the space and apply, and this should deploy the shell plugin to the managed app router. Because as I said, this is an UI5 application. It just goes into the app router repository. And here's where we have to go ahead and do some enablement of this content in the external configurator. We'll see that right now as soon as this deployment happens. And I'm really crossing my fingers that they do go through this time. Right, it's taking a while. So while it does continue, I would, okay, this is finished and looks like it did. Good. It's time for us to do the rest of the things. So we go to the administrative console, and this time we go to the external integration and go to the business content manager. And in the content manager, we will get into the, first we'll get into the content channel and use this to update the content channel, as in the current, the B2B's own managed app router is also a provider here, and then the corresponding content that is updated now by deploying this needs to be synced. So I just want to sync that to be fair on that, and then go to Content Explorer, go to this one and enable this. Going to be difficult to find out what did we do. What did I say? Was it game score footer? Yeah, this is the one, and I will add it to my content. Now, this is how I can add it to the content part, and this part is only have to be done once. Once you have done this, this should be available here. And now is the question, who do I assign it to? I can assign it to a specific group or a specific role. People with a specific role can only access it, or I can, for the brevity and ease of time, I would rather do it and set it to everyone so that it's available to everyone. Now, where is my game score footer? I just add it here, and you see the icon here. It shows that it's kind of a shell plugin. So the changes we did into the manifest are being considered, and it is considering it to be a shell plugin. Having done this, I will save this, and let's just go back here. You don't see any footer as yet, right? If I were to go back into Team Knowledge Center, you don't see a footer yet. That's because we haven't reloaded the application yet. So let me refresh, and that's how this footer, the application should really start. And there you go. We added a message, a toast message, and you can see I'm a message from a shell plugin. So this is how it worked. But we haven't really added the footer. I was thinking ahead of myself. We have to do that now. And that's where I will bring in the code that does that. So bear with me, and I'm going to bring some magic code from somewhere. All right, have it ready. I'm not a big fan of this formatter, so good. Right, so after this, what we are doing is we need to understand what we're doing here before we really deploy and see it happening. We are basically saying that we need the WebSocket library from UI5 libraries to be able to connect to a WebSocket, which is given by my service for a real-time update for scores. Then I'm creating a custom bar, which is a type SAP bar, because that's the kind of how we would add a menu bar or a footer bar. So that's a custom bar. I've added the text like some sort of a dummy button that doesn't really do much. If you press on it, it says to be implemented. Yeah, I've not gone the whole way of implementing a very sophisticated solution yet. And then there's a label which says my points are, and at this point of time, the text would be retrieving your points. Sorry, that's the idea of the label, and you would see this retrieving your points. What does it do next is I have to get to the renderer. Once I get hold of the renderer, I can use the renderer to do something on the UI. So once we get hold of this renderer using this get renderer of Fury 2 type, I can set the footer bar and set my custom bar as a footer, right? And the remaining part is basically adding a WebSocket client for the WebSocket client that I've created. Now, again, just a refresher, we did create a WebSocket client, and this is the one which I have already deployed into BTP. This is, as I can say, it is already working, right? You can do get my points. Right, so now that the WebSocket client is created, what we are doing is, for the first part, we are saying, as soon as you create the client, attach the open event and request for data right away. So if you send get my point, as you can see here, it returns the current point. If I just send again, it returns my current point. Same thing is now we attach a message. That means when the game engine sends a ad hoc message at times through the same WebSocket open connection, like updated point, I should be able to deal with it. And this will update the my points element, which is nothing but the label on the footer, with the text like currently you have so many points, share more knowledge and earn more points, something like that. Well, having done this, let's just simply do the same drill, build the MTA project. This will create a new empty archive. And now we deploy it. Now, once we deploy it, we wouldn't have to now add it to my content and so on and so forth, but still, given that it's a hosted content inside your app router repo, we would have to go in and refresh the content, and then the new shell plugin will get affected. Now we'll see what we do here. But that's in a nutshell how you could do. But what interestingly thing is, before it, while it's saving, is I want to show you how the webhook will work. Because the next part of the demo depends on two things. We can see the shell bar here, probably, hopefully, the footer bar here based on the shell plugin. But how do we update the points? We haven't talked about that part. So that's how it is done. Remember the webhooks? You basically need to go to the administrative console. You need to go to external integration, into notifications. And here's a notification callback URL created already, which is like notify user activity. So what am I doing here is I've taken the game service that I've created, put that URL into the notification part. And if I go into the edit mode, it will be a little more easy to understand. So there's this callback URL, which is basically from the game engine, which will be called every time something happens. What happens? Like in a workspace, something is created, or I've basically selected everything. So anybody doing anything in the workspace, please notify the game engine. But obviously you can pick and select which one, like only when there's someone edits a wiki, let someone know, and stuff like that. Remember the use case I was talking where you want to do content moderation using AI tools? You could use for specific cases like block created or comment created, you can notify the content, such kind of, yeah. So this is working. I would not notify created because when you create or edit it, it will call the game service again, might confuse the game service to add more points for no reason. So good that we have it here. I go back to my service and this is deployment is over, right? So if we now go back to my content, go into this and refresh this because the latest deployment should really be fetched. And the shell plugin should be now with the footer bar now, not just the message. I don't think we disabled the message so that the message will still come up. The message toast will still come up, I guess. But it's not going to harm us. We'll go here and refresh. Interestingly, you see it happening. So this is the game workspace. I remember I told you there is a dummy button that comes up, and here's your text, which was then changed because I was able to read the WebSocket. Let's put it to better use, a better test. So let's go to content and let's create a blog. See if I can get some point by creating blog. I am blog master. And I said, give me some points I want to win. All right, my blog is done. And let's see what happens if I do this. So I got 40 points for a blog because it became 400 points now from 360. And yeah, kind of greedy I am. I could create some other things like knowledge base articles, etc., and really get ahead in this competition. All right, having said that, that brings me to the closure of the demo and the session. So a quick recap, we talked about the other extensibility options post our previous sessions, where we started with work zone introduction. Then we talked about what are the possible ways of surfacing business data, what are the extensibility options within SAP Work Zone. Declarative cards being one and a very prominent of them. We saw the various capabilities that you could use with declarative cards in my previous session, how you could use the various context awareness and manifest to really stretch its capabilities. Then we looked into component cards, which is kind of something you would use when the basic declarative cards template do not suit the end requirements that you have. Then we talked about shell plugins. The shell plugins are ways in which you can modify the basic behavior of entire work zone. Like we just did, we added a footer. You could probably add menu items there or something inside your user menu dropdown, or change, I don't know, drastically the theme or something that might not be directly available as an option from Theme Manager. So things like that. And then we also talked about how you could integrate within SAP Work Zone using APIs and webhooks. And yeah, I can show you a quick demo of that as well. As in, I do have the APIs listed here. There are different kinds of APIs here. Let's just say I want to bring all the articles from my backend. I already have a one-time use token here. They should bring me the article, hopefully. For some reason, it's not. It's okay. But these are various set of APIs. Okay, it took some time. So all the articles you can. And this is how one could use the APIs to get articles. Obviously, you can also post or delete, change as an update the articles from a third-party solution. And quite useful, as I say. Yeah, and webhooks, where whenever there's an activity within Work Zone, one could get notified of such activity by registering yourself as a callback URL inside your notification, as a webhook notification, and yeah, react to such changes within SAP Work Zone content. With this, we conclude all the sessions of SAP Work Zone. Hope you enjoy the sessions.
Thanks, Ruben. I really like how, if I'm a UI5 developer, I can take advantage of that and leverage my knowledge to create a component card. And if I'm also a UI5 developer, but I'm familiar with working with BAS and creating MTA applications. I can reuse that knowledge to create Work Zone stuff, and I also have a lot of control, and I can do amazing things. And there's a lot of use cases I can see for doing that. So that's what to me is really good about this. So thank you very much. And to everybody, thanks for joining us for Devtoberfest. It's a little bit sad to say goodbye, but we'll see you soon. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.